This What's Working with Cam Marston podcast is brought to you courtesy of Michelob Ultra Beer.
They say consistency is the key to success. They weren't wrong. So how about grabbing a beer that's consistently smooth, consistently refreshing, and consistently light? You might just find that the road to success can be pretty enjoyable. Michelob Ultra, the perfect balance of taste and refreshment, and only 2.6 carbs and 95 calories. It's only worth it if you enjoy it. Enjoy responsibly. Anheuser-Busch Michelob Ultra Light Beer, St. Louis, Missouri.
Let's do this. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, housed in the Culverhouse College of Business, all housed at the University of Alabama. Welcome. Thanks for listening. What's Working is the show designed to bring you workplace, workforce, and marketplace trends to help you understand those workplace, workforce, and marketplace trends that are happening within your own organization. I'm bringing guests to the air that are going to make you a little bit better at whatever it is that you do. And today, 2 words for you: Navy SEAL. My goodness, the Navy SEALs seem to have cachet in our society, rightfully so. They're an exceptional group of people. The grueling process that makes them into a Navy SEAL also, I'm learning, gives them a capability of thinking through complex problems in the business world as well. And I was fortunate enough to be introduced via a networking connection that I never could have predicted, one of the magic parts of networking. I was fortunate to be introduced to Marty Strong. His book is called Be Nimble. And when we come back from break, I'll have Marty on the phone talking to me. He spent time successfully as a Navy SEAL, and then he entered into the business world. And the processes of training in the SEALs teach him how to diagnose problems in the business world. The processes of training leadership in the Navy SEALs teach him how to execute leadership in the business world. And we get him on the phone, talk to him a lot about the lessons he learned, how he learned them, and then the top handful of things. We don't have all the time in the world, but the top handful of things he can teach us to make us a little bit better at what it is that we do. This is going to be good. Hang in there with me. Before we go to break, a couple of things. The book is finally out. If you want a copy of Chapter 2, email me directly, cam@cammarston.com. Just put Chapter 2 in the subject line, and I'll send you Chapter 2. You'll be able to see the style of the book and how we go about underscoring the lessons learned in each of the different interviews that I feature in Chapter 2. Reach out to me. Let me send you a chapter. And if you like what you read, certainly I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and order that book. It's available on Amazon.com. It somehow happened automatically by the publisher. I don't know. I thought I'd have to do something. I checked it, and there it was, Amazon.com. The book is called What Works? The Top 10 Ideas for My First 200 Episodes. Also, before break, I want to mention my friends at Sandifer Wealth Management. I am a big fan of a designation called the Certified Financial Professional, the CFP. It's advertised on television, and I think it's a very worthy designation. CFPs must meet rigorous educational, ethical, and experiential standards in order to be considered a CFP. Planning properly will drive the results that you are looking for in your savings and investments. Sandifer Wealth Management has 2 CFPs, both Jamie Sandifer and Mark Salyers. Visit their website at sandiferwealthmanagement.com. Google them. They're on Old Shell Road here in Mobile. They'll certainly work with clients anywhere. They are 2 CFPs. It's a good group of people. I'm grateful to call them friends. CFPs being very important. When we come back from break, Marty Strong, he's the author of the book Be Nimble. He's got another one coming out in January 2023. We'll talk about that as well. Background as a Navy SEAL, has translated that background into a very successful business career, and then has taken the next step to write about how that works in the business world. You're listening to What's Working, brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate at the Culverhouse College of Business, University of Alabama. We'll be right back.
Think about how people really see you. The kid at the drive-thru just sees a coffee drinker.
Please pull forward.
Your local barista sees the person who loves a smiley face in their latte.
See you next time.
It's kind of the same way with insurance. Other insurance companies just see a customer, but a State Farm agent sees more. They see you as a neighbor. Your State Farm agent is here to get to know who you really are, so they can help life go right.
Call me, State Farm agent Allison Horner, in Mobile at 666-1616.
We're back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, housed in the Culverhouse College of Business, all at the University of Alabama. On the line with me is Marty Strong. He's an author. But perhaps what's going to catch your attention first is that he's a former Navy SEAL. These guys are sexy. And when they produce content, everybody lines up to learn exactly what it is. Marty Strong is his name. His background is impressive. I'll allow him to tell you a little bit about it. His book is Be Nimble. Marty, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to What's Working.
Thanks for having me, Cam.
You're now either the second or third Navy SEAL we've had on the show. They always come well prepared. They always come with very cogent and succinct ideas. I first want you to tell us a little bit about your time with the SEALs, and then I want to introduce you to our audience, and we'll begin the content at that point. So step one, tell us a little bit about your background in the SEALs, the years, some of that you can share.
Sure. So I was the least likely candidate you'd ever imagine for SEAL teams. I was 17 years old when I joined the Navy, went to SEAL training. I was probably 125 pounds soaking wet. We had a class of about 126 that started. And during the 6-month crucible that we call BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL training, during that 6 months, we lost all but 13 of those 126. Most of them quit and found that it wasn't something they wanted to continue trying to do. So I found myself at the end of 6 months at about 128 pounds, standing there with 12 other guys, and realized that I'd actually made it through that crucible. So that began my first half of my SEAL career as an enlisted SEAL. I went to SEAL Team 2 after Army Jump School. SEAL Team 2 is on the East Coast of the United States. When I first joined SEAL Team 2, there were only about 300 SEALs all total in the United States Navy. Now there's about 3,600.
No kidding.
So it was an exclusive club that nobody knew about because we didn't have any movies or books, and that was fine with us. So sometime around 1986, 85, President Reagan decided he wanted to double the number of SEALs. So we started to expand, we started to recruit, we started to advertise, and that took about 10 years to double the size, because you can't just go out there and find people that are going to get through that course anywhere. And the attrition, the 75% loss of student population per class, has stayed pretty true since 1962 when the SEALs were formed. And so it takes a long time to grow more SEALs. I ended up spending the second half of my 20-year career as an officer. I went to Officers Candidate School, went right back into the SEAL team. So all in 20 years as a SEAL.
Yeah. I think, like I said when I opened, the story of the SEALs is so sexy. And what I want to do is introduce you to my listener so that my listener understands your background and that you understand what we are going for in the show. And then I want to ask you a little bit about why your background and your training as a SEAL has led you how to tackle business problems, which is what this show is eventually going to be about. So my listener, the people that we've worked hard to win the favor of on this radio show, is typically going to be a 40 to 45-year-old influencer in his or her business. Largely going to be male. 75% of my listeners are male. And like I said, they're decision makers. It could mean that they're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. It could be that they manage the team of people who are, a yard crew, something like that. The point is, though, they're influencers. They have the potential or the position authority to make decisions that influence other people. And I try to find guests that can give them ideas on how to do their job and better and see the world differently. But to get back to that question I was in the midst of asking, why is the SEAL training so good for creating business minds? I've had, like I said, you're either the second or third person on here that has talked about business with a SEAL background. What about it? Is it the training or is it the person that is adept at talking about the business? Tell me, does the question make sense?
Yeah, it's definitely binary. It's half the person, whether it's DNA or early influences, parents, other mentors, et cetera, before they got into the SEALs that formed them and forged them into a resilient mind that could handle stress, that could be self-motivated, didn't have to rely on other mechanisms of motivation. And those are the kinds of people, those are the kinds of personalities with those kinds of attributes that make it through that crucible of training. That's what they're looking for. That's the raw material. The second half, or the other side of that coin, is the actual training. So part of the training is to draw out more and more of those positive attributes, to challenge the person to a much stricter and much higher level, higher standard than they probably experienced as a teenager or as a kid, wherever they forged and established these character traits. And that's usually done by scenario training, running everybody through kind of chaos and crisis situations. Sometimes they're physical, sometimes they're tabletop exercises and planning where the variables are vague, or there's a lot of information, too much information, and they have to start making decisions, or somebody comes in and changes all the information right about the time they finish the plan. Anything that will mess up their mind and cause them to realize that what they're doing as SEALs is chaotic and unpredictable, and that's why it's called special operations. So it's a combination of those two factors.
So it's the resilience of the individual to get through the physical part, and the ability of the individual to think through all these constantly changing variables that are thrown at you during SEAL training that positions you to step into the business world and make sense of the chaos and confusion out there. Did I sum that up correctly?
That's right. It's like a coach who finds somebody who's got all the physical characteristics of a great sprinter but doesn't know how to run very well, and then teaches them how to be extremely efficient and economical in the way they run to optimize their performance.
So when you left the SEALs and got into business, I know the first chapter of your career was at UBS as a financial person. Did you like business? Did you find it appealing? Was it challenging the same way the SEALs were?
It was, in that, when you're in the SEALs, you learn humility by constantly being put in positions or being asked to learn new skills that you have absolutely no idea how to execute. For example, they might send you to a boat engine repair school and you have no mechanical aptitude, but you're going to go through that whole school and come out certified. Then they send you to a lock picking school. Then they send you to some specialized oxygen, high altitude parachute technical school. And they're all different. They're all radically disconnected, and they're similar in that they're all required for the SEAL mission, but they're different technical demands, different intellectual demands. And so you kind of get used to that, but what you don't ever do in the SEAL teams is learn how to sell. So when I got out of uniform, the biggest shock to me was that the business of being in business was about selling. And I didn't learn it in my undergrad. I didn't learn it in my graduate program. I didn't learn it in the SEAL teams. We didn't stand up and do features and benefits. We didn't do conceptual presentations. We didn't understand the difference between the two. So I started from a cold start, the worst salesperson in the state of Maryland, and then ran around trying to find every mentor I could possibly find to help me shore up that. So I was at a great deficit when I started in the financial services industry for that one reason, because that's how you found your clients.
And you didn't know how to sell. And I'm assuming when you say sell, it means both internally and externally. In other words, I've got to find customers willing to pay me, but I got to find people internally that are willing to invest in me or to become my mentor. You're selling yourself, you're selling your product. Yeah,
I think in the beginning, it was more the pitiful nature of my story. The internal mentors that were helping me, they realized that I really didn't know how to sell, but I was motivated enough to reach out to them, and they were a little bit flattered, but they're happy to help. Later on, once I was out of financial services and in the corporate leadership, you're absolutely right. I realized that the same kind of putting together a sales presentation, the process of influencing is not that much different internally or externally, but it's required in both realms. And depending on what you're selling, kind of drives what your sales process and your sales cycle, the length of and the frequency of looks like on the outside. So, yeah, it becomes something that's critical in business. And once I learned it, I was happy that I did, and I've tried to improve it as much as I can through more mentoring ever since.
You mentioned mentoring a number of times. Let's get into the book, Be Nimble, and a little bit about the book. And we're running up on break. It'll give us a perfect amount of time for you to introduce the book. And when we come back from break, we'll start talking about the lessons learned. Excuse me. Go ahead. Be Nimble. Tell me about it.
Yeah. So the subtitle is How the Creative Navy SEAL Mindset Wins on the Battlefield and in Business. And to your original question at the beginning of the segment, how do you tie things that are valuable and impactful on the battlefield in the business of the military to the business of business? And when I sat down to write the book, I thought through all the things that I had expressed in mentoring sessions and coaching sessions to outside CEOs and presidents and business owners that had asked me for help, but also my own organization where I'm the CEO, to my senior leaders. And I started to kind of codify what I thought being a good business leader or aspiring to be a good business leader meant to me, and kind of listed them in a progressive order that I thought made sense in kind of a learning structure. So you're going through a little bit of a story arc as you progress through the book. And it starts with the leader doing a self-inventory, which I'm a big believer in. Strengths, weaknesses, kind of a SWOT analysis of the leader before you start going out there to either try to change the organization or change individuals in the organization. And that's the gist of the book. That's the thesis of the book. I have not read it cover to cover, getting into it, have enjoyed it. And that SWOT analysis, that's chapter 1. The SWOT analysis, I thought about doing one myself and how brutal it would be for me to write my own. And that's something I wanted to ask you about as well is, if I were to create one, am I supposed to hand it to somebody and say, do you think this is accurate, or does it stay with me? However, let's get into that after break. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. On the line with me, Marty Strong. His book is called Be Nimble. Background is as a Navy SEAL, as well as some remarkable business expertise gained since then. We'll be right back after this break. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, housed in the Culver House College of Business, all housed at the University of Alabama.
This is Trey Langus with Transworld Business Advisors. I help business owners sell their businesses from mom and pop size to large mergers and acquisitions. We have a huge buyer database looking for quality businesses to buy right now. Confidentiality guaranteed. If you're a business owner considering an exit within the next few years, let's talk. Again, I'm Trey Langus. Find me at Transworld Business Advisors or Google my name.
Customer service never goes out of style. In fact, I think it's safe to say that customer service is more valuable and more important now more than ever. Hi, this is Cam Marston. One thing that my over 200 episodes of What's Working has taught me is how important customer service is to building and maintaining a thriving business. It's the growing need for customer service that's led me to partner with one of the state's leading customer service trainers to create our program called Delivering 5-Star Customer Service. Your team will get one 90-minute training session per month for 6 consecutive months. Each session builds on the skills learned the previous month, allowing your customer-facing teams to practice before moving on to the next lesson. And the 6 lessons address everything from appearance to electronic communications to conflict resolution to maintaining a service mindset. Our program travels and is delivered in person at your workplace, nothing virtual. You simply can't practice the level of the skills this course teaches virtually. For more information, email me, cam@cammarston.com, and let's schedule a time to talk. Remember, you have less to fear from outside competition than you do from discourtesy and bad service from inside your own company. Again, email me, cam@cammarston.com, and let's talk about your business. We're back. You're listening to What's Working. On the line with me is Marty Strong. His book is called Be Nimble. His background is as a Navy SEAL as well as a very successful businessman. We're talking a little bit about the content of Be Nimble. There's no way to get into it all. It's a book rich with great advice and tactics. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate at the Culverhouse College of Business at the University of Alabama. Marty, the times that I've engaged in Navy people, and perhaps this is the case with all the armed services, they tend to be really preferential towards checklists. And I want to know if you've got a checklist of the top 2 or 3 things, let's say, that people can take from the book Be Nimble. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do, and I'm glad that you set the book up that way, because I did try to write a narrative, a story, like it's communication and conversation between me as a mentor and the reader, and putting tips and tools in there was an important feature of the book in my mind. So I'll share a couple with you. These are all in 3s, ironically. So the first one is the personal realignment, which we touched on in the last segment.
Yeah.
Doing the self-inventory, but the outcome, the goals that you're looking for in your personal realignment, which becomes a part of your professional realignment, comes in 3 parts. The first one is to achieve intellectual humility. That's essentially clearing your mind of all the accolades and all the pats on the back that you've received. Get yourself down to a point where you feel like you have an open mind about what your capabilities are, which means you can fail, you might fail, so you need to pay more attention and be open-minded. The other component of that is also, if you've had some negative effects in your life, your business, et cetera, you want to shred those out of your mind also, because they can drag you down and give you a negative mindset. So intellectual humility.
Let me stop right there. Negative
Sure.
mindsets are the negative. So you're obviously, that does not mean learning from your mistakes. You're talking about the bruises of failure, not the lessons of failure. Am I correct?
Yeah. The emotional gut punches.
Yeah.
You just got a divorce. You were let go of your last job and you just started a new job. So you have this thing hanging over you. You think maybe, you're not as good as you could be, or maybe you're at risk again. Those are inhibitors. Whereas all the positive and accolades and all the, the trophies and everything are actually kind of blinders. They're making you think you're better than you are. So to achieve intellectual humility, you have to kind of remove both categories.
Inhibitors and blinders. Love it. Love it. New frameworks, new paradigms for me to think. All the accolades, and as I sit here at my desk recording, I'm looking at a couple, maybe should put them in a drawer and just pretend like they're not there.
Exactly. So if you can achieve that state of mind, then that allows you to achieve the next thing, which is intellectual curiosity. So intellectual curiosity is a very active intellectual process. It's an engagement in new information, new insights. You're already open-minded because you have the first step of intellectual humility in place. You're going to listen to people that you normally wouldn't listen to. You're going to seek inspiration and advice from sources you normally wouldn't seek those from. And if you can achieve that curiosity, then you get to the third step, which is intellectual creativity. At that point, you have an open mind. You've expressed this desire to pull in data and information and insights from any and all sources, and now you're poised to be creative in a way you haven't been before. This is essentially, you put these 3 together, by definition, you are a nimble leader if you are doing these three things. And the time to exercise them is when you're confronted with a challenge, or you're presented with a challenge each and every day, and before you go to a knee-jerk football play formula way of responding, which is very narrow-minded and tunnel vision in approach, stop yourself and go through these 3 steps.
Do you find, Marty, that I could make myself curious if I'm not a curious guy? It sounds, frankly, the word I want to use is exhausting to remain curious, though I believe I am. And if you knew more about me, you'd know that this show is a result of my curiosity. It sounds like it could be exhausting to constantly remain curious that way. Also, you mentioned in the book that people get into their niches, and they're very good at what they do in their niches, and they don't want to get out because of the unknown environment. How do I push myself out of my niche? How do I make myself more curious if that's not who I am naturally?
Well, in the context of being a leader and those 3 steps, what I would recommend is that you stay channeled and focused on the problem at hand that you're trying to solve. So your curiosity, I'll give you an example. If somebody came to me and said, we just lost an accountant, and that accountant is critical to what we're doing. We need to come together and figure out how we're going to solve this problem. Now, I could say, hire another accountant and walk away, because that's what I've always done. Or I could say, call an accounting temp agency and get an accountant in here and then walk away. Or I could sit down and say, okay, let's get to a whiteboard. Let's come up with all the different ways we can do this. Is there anybody else we can stretch left or right to cover the gap? Well, we can give us more time to think about things. Do we want to bring a part-time? Do we want to bring in a gig economy style consulting accountant that can do this as much as we need them to? Let's call this company. Let's call that company. Let's get a couple of presentations. Let's look at this from other people's eyes and bring in other viewpoints before we make a decision. But see, that's curiosity, because I'm opening up all these doors to get all this other information in that normally we wouldn't address if we were just doing what we did last year. But it's very much focused on the problem at hand.
So the reaction to that from someone may be, Marty, this sounds like great ideas, but time is also an asset that we never have enough of. And us going through this brainstorming process of how to replace the accountant creatively is a time sucker. We've got a meeting to have. We've got a whiteboard, and there'll be action items off the whiteboard that everybody in the room will need to take on. On the other hand, if I say, go to a temp agency, hire an accountant, maybe that's done in 5 minutes. Maybe it's done in 5 hours versus an entirely new project. What's your reaction to that?
Well, it's like a lot of different behaviors. You have to change the behavior, practice behavior, so it becomes more of a both an aptitude, an attitude, and a habit. And in this case, it's solution design. If you don't teach your people, your team, whether they're leaders or subset tactical groups, how to do solution design, how to actually solve problems mechanically, how to break them apart, put them back together again, search for additional information and data, sift through that, analyze that, throw it all together, come up with a draft solution, beat it up a little bit, come up with a final solution. They're always going to take a long time doing that, because it's always going to be a cold start exercise. What I talk about in the book and the way I lead my teams, we basically would just grab everybody that's the smart person that we can find and get them on the phone or whatever, get them on a call, Zoom call, whatever. And we essentially have a virtual or an actual whiteboard session right there in the moment. And since everybody knows exactly how this process is going to go, how it's going to feel, and it's not going to take forever, it's not a meeting. It's an actual physical engagement. It's an intellectual engagement. So they don't really take as long as you might think. I've wire diagrammed and facilitated an entire revenue cycle management process for a healthcare company in about 54 minutes with 20 people in the room, all throwing their 2 cents in and all their insights in like nail soup, everybody throwing everything into the pot, and me just kind of facilitating it and drawing it up as it's happening. Not because I wasn't the expert. I was just the person driving the solution design sequence.
So, Marty, I could go way down a rabbit hole here. What other things have you prepared for our conversation for these for my listeners?
So, the other two are the study of the work design, the way the organization is structured, and then the actual job description of each position within that structure. There's 3 elements that I talk about in the book that you have to pay attention to at all times. One's volume, second one's velocity, and third one's complexity. So if you create a job description, you put somebody in there, you've done the hiring, onboarding, whatever training is required, and they're operating great, then down the road, maybe a year later, they start to have problems, you need to look at the job design again. Because 9 times out of 10, it's not the person that's starting to change their behavior. It's the organization that's either demanding more of them. They want more work in the same amount of time. They want the work to be pushed faster. Or maybe the work that's hitting their desk, hitting their laptop or their screen is more complex than it was before. And senior management and middle management tend to not understand that actually changed the dynamic of the original positional design. Mm-hmm. And you can have people burning out with wheels wobbling and falling off that are great people, but you've actually changed the deal on them. You just don't know it.
I see. So it's incumbent upon leadership to know that when these changes happen, it also changes the way the work gets done and the functioning of the team. And being aware of that allows you to moderate or mitigate these things, rather.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One of the things that you and I have talked about is humility. This is in the call prior to this one, and you've mentioned it on the phone here today. I'm wondering, we're running up on break again. This is this crime of getting someone like you on a show like this, is the inability to go deep on so much of this stuff. But when we come back from break, I want to talk about what you see in the future of the workplace, how things are changing. And I want to make sure we touch on this component of humility. I listened to a speaker about 3 months ago say that people are humble or they're not. And he was a business speaker, and he also advocated for humility. But he said they're either humble or they're not. And I'm wondering what you think about that and how you find them. Is there a question in an interview that you can ask to find this humility as well as the future of the workplace? Sound good?
Yep.
When we come back from break, Marty and I will get into these two things. His book is called Be Nimble, Marty Strong, History with the Navy SEALs. He is a member of the SEALs today, author of a book and a forthcoming book coming out in January that maybe we'll get a chance to talk about as well. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, housed in the Culverhouse College of Business, all at the University of Alabama.
This is Trey Langus with Transworld Business Advisors. You've worked for years to grow and build your business, and now you're considering an exit strategy. Selling your business can be intimidating and complex. Let our local team at Transworld Business Advisors help you. We are the largest business brokerage in the world, and I will personally and confidentially guide you through this process. I'm Trey Langus. Find me at Transworld Business Advisors or Google my name.
Marty Strong is on the line with me. His book is Be Nimble. He's got a background in the Navy SEALs, a very successful business background as well, and has begun to try to share his lessons in leadership with people like you and me through this book. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate. Marty, prior to the break, I asked you about humility and the significance of humility. The speaker that I was referencing in the prior segment said people are either humble or they're not. And I asked him, how do you make somebody, particularly an executive who's had some success in his or her background, how do you make them humble if they're not? And he said, you can't. The only thing you can do, you'll find as adults who've become humble, is they've been in a recovery program for some sort of drug addiction. I thought that's a pretty dramatic answer. Tell me about the significance of humility, how you find it, and how you develop it in people who need a little bit more of it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point of view. It kind of reminds me of the leader dilemma, the nature versus nurture debate that goes on all the time. You can't train people to be leaders. They have to be born. If they don't have the right DNA, they can never really succeed as leaders. I don't agree with that completely, and I don't think I agree with the idea that you're locked in as far as your behaviors and your attitudes. There's just too much human experience out there that goes against that point of view. Yeah, I mean, if you put somebody in the woods for 3 days with hardly enough food and water, they're going to come out really humble.
Yeah, you've got a very good point. And unfortunately, the business leaders listening don't have the opportunity to do so, nor do they have they say, boy, you've got a great mind. I'm going to send you through SEAL training in order to humble you a little bit. They're taking what the employment marketplace has to offer. Why, though, is humility so important?
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I guess the point I was trying to make is that we're not hardwired to be one or the other. Yeah. And so what you do is you have to create, I believe in scenario-based training for leaders. And in doing scenario-based training, you set up, just like in the SEAL teams, you set up scenarios that are actual scenarios for those leaders in the workplace. And you run them through. It can be tabletop. You can have it facilitated from the outside. It doesn't really matter which one, as long as you're doing it. And then the senior leaders have to be willing to allow failure to happen. If you don't allow failure to happen, then nobody's ever going to learn how to be humble, because they're all going to be trying to protect themselves, protect their job, and they're going to act completely differently. So you have to get them used to doing whatever the exercise is, going through the scenario, making a bad choice, being critiqued on that, and then they go back through again and again and again. Pretty soon, failure becomes something that's just part of being a leader and part of exercising leadership in those exercises, those drills. And you start to become open to learning new things. And it's not about preservation, all the things that you see out there in the commercial world and in politics. It's about preserving the status quo, your positional authority, et cetera, not about personal growth. That kind of humility requires that kind of leadership from the top down, and that kind of atmosphere, that kind of culture, kind of like we talked about before about the solution design. It has to become a culture. And when you get to that point, then having intellectual humility is a possibility. And that means, so the other thing is to have emulated leadership opportunities. So the senior leaders have to be the first ones to practice intellectual humility so that it's observed. Mm-hmm. And then they need to explain why they used it, how they applied it to get through the curiosity, creativity phase, and then how it made a very good solution occur. And then tell their leaders that that's what they went through, to reinforce and give legitimacy to the whole point of starting with humility.
SEALs and humility don't seem to be hand in hand. I'm taking from your content here, I'm wrong.
It's kind of like what my wife says. She figures that all SEALs are impervious to cold water. And I said, no, Navy SEALs will walk 5 miles to go around a stream rather than get wet.
Yeah.
We are 100% in tune and understand what cold water means and what it does, especially over a long period of time. And it's the same thing with being humble. We experiment a lot in the SEAL teams. We try things. We are constantly training, the way I've mentioned before. We're practicing, we're stretching our capabilities, which means we're failing all the time. And as a leader or as a technical operator in the SEAL teams, and the Green Berets are the same way. You are constantly being put in public, being put in a position where you fail less over time, but you still fail. Otherwise, the training's not going to be of any value. So they make it even harder. So you're still going to fail. The whole point of that is that when you actually get into the real, combat situation, it seems simpler and easier by multiple, levels than the training that they put you through to prepare for that mission, which tends to be true.
Yeah. So the execution of the mission is so much easier than the training, that you walk out of the mission going, that was cakewalk.
Yeah. So humility isn't the same as having confidence, or we all have team guys, SEAL team guys have extreme confidence, but part of that confidence is based on, they know that when push comes to shove, they can start from scratch, rethink the whole problem, and then come up with a plan of action and then execute. It's not based on any crutches of any kind.
Talk to me about the future of the workplace. This is a question that's been given to me many times by my consulting clients. Where are we going from here? COVID kind of changed things. The hiring marketplace here in Alabama, our unemployment rate is well under 3% now. What's the future of the workplace as you see it, Marty?
Well, we were going through major changes in the way work was being done in the United States prior to the pandemic. The thing that accelerated what we're seeing today was the pandemic and the application of technology, the video conferencing technology. Also, what a lot of people don't realize is that cloud-based platforms to do all kinds of business functions, even something as interesting as 3D printing, was all being amplified by greater and greater capabilities, technology on platforms where you didn't have to sit in a factory, you didn't have to sit in an office to perform those tasks. Something as simple as an accountant pushing payroll, which they couldn't have done from their home because they had to do it from their office because they didn't have the bandwidth. Well, now they can do it all through a cloud-based system. And those systems were just coming online when the pandemic hit, and now they're all supersized, supercharged, and everybody's relying on them. That has allowed everybody to decide, and I'm talking about everybody meaning both the workforce and the employers. They have choices now. It's not everybody has to old school be in a cubicle, in a building, in a factory. Now they have choices, and the choices, the way I see them, are probably fall down to three different categories. The first one is physical production or physical production based work. So old school, you have a factory where parts have to be inserted and have to be handled, and things have to be touched with human hands. And I think that's going to be, whatever that industry is, that's going to stay for a long time. But it's also going to be augmented with artificial intelligence and robotics. And at some point, depending on how the demographics of the country go, it might be as much as a 50-50 split in those industries they're still requiring manufacturing and production in a factory scenario. The second one is knowledge-based. This is kind of easy to understand because if you can do all your work from any place on the planet because you have access to a cloud platform that allows you to do your work, and your work is intellectual, and you're doing analysis, you're doing reviews, you're doing writing, you're doing calculations, etc., then that's all going to be remote, and that's going to be a virtual workforce. And I think we've already seen that. I've already done it myself. I went from 21,000 square feet of leased space before COVID. I'm down to 6,000 now. And I've got more employees than I had before COVID. So I've got pretty much 90% of my workforce that are in my organization are now remote virtual. The third one is service-based. And I think service-based is going to be a hybrid. There'll be some AI assistance and maybe a little bit of robotics, but the idea that everybody's going to want to go out and have a dinner, to go shopping, things like that, and have to do that all self-help, I think that's going to be an inhibitor to the whole point of going out and having some free time away from the house, especially when your house, and the second option, has become your workplace also. So those are the three over the next kind of the new normal, next normal, over the next 10 years. I think they're all going to fall into those three buckets as far as the work.
Can you build culture with a remote workforce? Can you maintain culture, much of like what you've talked about, the humility, the failure? Can you create these things with a remote workforce? You
can, as long as you're doing your hiring and your screening and all that, when you're screening for cultural behaviors, you're doing that face-to-face, or you're doing it as thoroughly as you ever did face-to-face. And also they have to do what I said before about teaching. There's a culture of failure being something you learn from. There's a culture of solution design being an all hands on deck whiteboard session, whether it's virtual or not. These are all things that if you teach those, you onboard them to understand that's what you're getting into, and then your management teams are sustaining those principles and those cultural norms. Yes, you can do that. Is it the same as having the company picnic on the back lawn or something like that? No, it's not as intimate. It's not as human, but you can still have a business work culture that's effective and efficient, even if it's remote.
What is your favorite interview question, and what are you listening for in their answer?
I usually ask the question, describe your worst day at work. And I usually get one of two, and I actually sit in a lot of the interviews to ask this one question. It's the only question I actually ask. I usually get one of two different responses. I either get a response where they start to describe the problem that caused the bad day, and almost everything is in the context of it happened to them, and they were a victim of it, and that's why it was a bad day for them. The other category of answers falls into, it's a challenge. It was tough because they had a lot of things that they had to do. They had deadlines to meet, and this got dumped on them at the last second, and they worked hard and they learned from it, but it was a really hard day or a hard event because they weren't expecting it. They weren't prepared for it. They had to work long hours and everything. I'm looking for the victim, and it's happening to me, as opposed to this is a challenge and I'm actually happy. We did a great job. It was just tough to get through. Those are two very different attitudes towards the same event and the same question.
Tell us about the next book, Marty. January 2023 is what I see on Amazon.
Yeah, so it's out for pre-sale right now. It's called Be Visionary: Strategic Leadership in the Age of Optimization. And the theme of this book, it doesn't pick up directly from Be Nimble, in that Be Nimble was more about functional leadership. This one is about how to lead companies from a visionary standpoint, how to convert and create a strategy from a vision, and then how to create an operational execution plan that aligns with that strategy. Also, how to pitch internally, how to use both your creative people that have open minds to help you with, I call it your dream team, to flesh out the strategy, and then have the naysayers essentially be your rough stone that the ideas get brushed up against to get smarter and, challenge them to find holes in it. So it's a very functional book from the standpoint of turning vision into strategy and having strategy based on a good operational plan of action. So, I think it's probably more insightful for leaders who are not touching strategy, that are looking at measuring every week. That's the optimization component of the subtitle. That I've found that very few companies, large and small, are really truly doing strategy. They're not looking out 2 years. They're not looking at the horizon. They're not looking for opportunities and threats. They're basically looking at next week's results and last week's results.
That's January 2023. The current book is called Be Nimble. It's available on Amazon.com. I've been listening to it in my car for the past many days as I've gotten prepared for this interview with Marty. Marty, if people want to find out more about you, where can they go?
They can go to martystrongbenimble.com.
martystrongbenimble.com. I'll have a link to it in the podcast. Marty, this has been fantastic. We could have consumed twice this amount of time. Thank you so much for your willingness to join us today.
Thanks for having me, Cam.
I'll be back after this in segment 5 with final comments. You're listening to What's Working, brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate in the Culverhouse College of Business, all housed at the University of Alabama.
Life insurance is one of those subjects that make people want to change the subject rather than admit they probably don't have enough. I'm State Farm agent Allison Horner, and that's why I focus on how the benefits of life insurance actually live on by asking people to think in terms of life without having to sell the house insurance, or life without having to give up college insurance. Find out how the benefits of life insurance can live on for your family. Call me, State Farm agent Allison Horner, and get to a better state with State Farm.
This is David Steele, managing partner of Monroe Meat Company in Beatrice, Alabama. We stay busy making sausage, processing deer, calling on customers, trying to sell the best sausage and bacon that can be found. But when I have time to take a break, I'm listening to What's Working with Cam Marston. Now, back to the show.
The book is Be Nimble, the author Marty Strong. You can find it on Amazon. You can listen to it on Audible. Maybe that's what I use, something through Amazon. It's been playing in my car now for a while. I'm not quite done with it. It's chock-a-block, to use a word I heard one time. It's chock-a-block with content, folks. And it is the type of leadership and business book that you read for action items. And it's good. It really is. I wouldn't have had him on had I not kind of vetted it my own way to say, is this something I want to present to my listeners? And it's good. Marty Strong, his book is called Be Nimble. That'll wrap us up for this week. If you have someone that wants to hear this show or needs to hear this show, you can find it at what'sworkingcam.com. Hopefully by the time I say this, our new website will be up and you can peruse that and send me all your oohs and ahs and accolades on this new website, which has been a work in progress and I'm very, very pleased with. So what'sworkingcam.com, check it out there. Show is produced by John Thompson with Ion Digital. And every time I say that means it's another day that he can't go drink beer on Horn Island, which I know he loves so much. He's instead editing my ands and ums. If you want chapter 2 of the new book, email me, cam@cammarston.com. Put chapter 2 in the subject line. I'll send it to you. You can evaluate it. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, housed in the Culverhouse College of Business, all at the University of Alabama. We'll have another show next week.